Hello, today's daily reading comes from the book of the Apocrypha. We are reading from the book of Jasher, chapter 48, starting at verse 34, and it reads as follows. And some time after we were in the ward, we dreamed dreams in one night, and I, the chief of the bakers, we dreamed each man according to the interpretation of his dream, and we came in the morning and told them to that servant, and he interpreted to us our dreams, to each man according to his dream did he correctly interpret. And it came to pass, as he interpreted to us, so was the event. There fell not to the ground any of his words. And now, therefore, my lord and king, do not slay the people of Egypt for naught. Behold, that slave is still confined in the house by the captain of the guard, his master in the house of confinement. If it pleases the king, let him send for him, that he may come before you, and he will make known to you the correct interpretation of the dream which you did dream. And the king heard the words of the chief butler, and the king ordered that the wise men of Egypt should not be slain. And the king ordered his servants to bring Joseph before him, and the king said unto them, Go to him, and do not terrify him, lest he be confused and will not know to speak properly. And the servants of the king went to Joseph, and they brought him hastily out of the dungeon. And the king's servant shaved him, and he changed his prison garment, and he came before the king. And the king was sitting upon his royal throne in a princely dress girt around with the golden ephod, and the fine gold which was upon it sparkled in the carbuncle and the ruby and the emerald, together with all the precious stones that were upon the king's head, dazzled the eye. And Joseph wondered greatly at the king. And the throne upon which the king sat was covered with gold and silver and with onyx stones, and it had 70 steps. And it was their custom throughout the land of Egypt that every man who came to speak to the king, if he was a prince or one that was estimable in the sight of the king, he ascended to the king's throne as far as the 31st step, and the king would descend to the 36th step and speak with him. If he was one of the common people, he ascended to the third step, and the king would descend to the fourth and speak to him. And their custom was, moreover, that any man who understood to speak in all the 70 language, he ascended the 70 steps, and went up and spoke until he reached the king. And any man who could not complete the 70, he ascended as many steps as the languages which he knew to speak in. And it was customary in those days in Egypt that no one should reign over them, but who understood to speak in the 70 languages. And when Joseph came before the king, he bowed down to the ground before the king, and he ascended to the third step. And the king sat upon the fourth step and spoke with Joseph. And the king said unto Joseph, I dreamed a dream, and there is no interpreter to interpret it properly. And I commanded this day that all the magicians of Egypt and the wise men thereof should come before me. And I related my dreams to them, and no one has properly interpreted them to me. And after this, I this day heard concerning you that you are a wise man and can correctly interpret every dream that you hear. And Joseph answered Pharaoh, saying, Let Pharaoh relate his dreams that he dreamed. Surely the interpretations belong to God. And Pharaoh related his dreams to Joseph, the dream of the knife and the dream of the ears of corn. And the king left off speaking. And Joseph was then clothed with the Spirit of God before the king. And he knew all the things that would befall the king from the day forward. And he knew the proper interpretation of the king's dream, and he spoke before the king. And Joseph found favor in the sight of the king, and the king inclined his ears and his heart, and he heard all the words of Joseph. And Joseph said unto the king, Do not imagine that they are two dreams, for it is only one dream. For that which God has chosen to do throughout the land, he has shown to the king in his dream. And this is the proper interpretation of your dream. The 7 good kine and ears of corn are 7 years, and the 7 bad kine and ears of corn are also 7 years. It is one dream. Behold, the 7 years that are coming, there will be a great plenty throughout the land, and after that, the 7 years of famine will follow them, a very grievous famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten from the land, and the famine will consume the inhabitants of the land. The king dreamed one dream, and the dream was therefore repeated unto Pharaoh, because the thing is established by God, and God will shortly bring it to pass. Now therefore I will give you counsel and deliver your soul and the souls of the inhabitants of the land from the evil of the famine that you seek throughout your kingdom for a man very discreet and wise, who knows all the affairs of government, and appoint him to superintendent over the land of Egypt, and let the man whom you place over Egypt appoint officers under him, and they gather all the food of the good years that are coming, and let them lay up corn and deposit it in your appointed stores, and let them keep the food for the 7 years of famine, that it may be found for you and your people and your whole land, and that you and your land be not cut off by the famine. Let all the inhabitants of the land be also ordered, that they gather in every man the produce of the field, all sorts of foods during the 7 good years, and that they place it in their stores, that it may be found for them in the days of the famine, and that they may live upon it. This is the proper interpretation of your dream, and this is the counsel given to save your soul and the souls of all your subjects. And the king answered and said unto Joseph, who says and who knows what that is, that your words are correct? And he said unto the king, this will be a sign for your respecting all my words, that they are true, and that my advice is good for you. Behold, your wife sits this day upon the stool of delivery, and she will bear you a son, and you will rejoice with him. When your child will have gone out from his mother's womb, your firstborn son that has been born these 2 years back will die, and you will be comforted in the child that will be born unto you this day. And Joseph finished speaking these words to the king, and he bowed down to the king, and he went out. And when Joseph had gone out from the king's presence, those signs which Joseph had spoken unto the king came to pass on that day. And the queen bore a son on that day, and the king heard the glad tidings about his son, and he rejoiced. And when the reporter had gone out from the king's presence, the king's servants found the firstborn son of the king fallen dead upon the ground. And there was great lamentation and noise in the king's house. And the king heard it, and he said, what is the noise and lamentation that I have heard in the house? And they told the king that his firstborn son had died. Then the king knew that all Joseph's words that he had spoken were correct. And the king was consoled for his son by the child that was born to him on that day, as Joseph had spoken. Amen.